Good evening. I hope you could see my hat because I want to make sure you see what's written on it before I pick my head up. Yes, Grub Hub. Why is he wearing a Grub Hub hat? Am I a Grub Hub driver? No, no more. But once upon a time, this hat is so comfortable. I wish I could wear it more, but every time I go into the store, they're probably not going to give me service. They're probably going to make me wait until the other customers order because they're going to think that I'm picking up for Grubhub and I no longer work for Grubhub, which happens to be was one of the better food delivery apps to work for when I was in that line of work. So I thought, what the hell? Let me tell you some tales. Let me tell you some stories. Let me tell you about my rideshare app and food delivery app experience, and it goes back probably, I would say probably to around 2018. I started off with a company named Postmates, which eventually I believe got bought out by Uber Eats. But anyway, I started off working for Postmates in Manhattan, and I would go into Manhattan to deliver the food on my bicycle. But then, I'm not gonna lie, I was new to these apps. I didn't really start figuring apps until probably, not too long after that, probably because when I started working for Uber and DoorDash, that's when I started to figure them out. But I was new to the apps. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know how to use it, and I think I went into Manhattan and I did two orders, maybe two orders, made a few bucks, and I never went back in again. But then a few months later, I got a car, and so I started doing DoorDash on Long Island, DoorDash, and then Uber Eats, and then I started doing Uber X and Lyft. So for a long time, that was, I had a regular job too, but those are my side hustles. Like a lot of you folks, most of us, we always have to have a side hustle, right? And before 2018, I had various side hustles. I always had a full-time job, but I always had side hustles like I'd be a on-call direct care worker in a group home. I was a telemarketer. I used to deliver newspapers like early in the morning of the week. I even worked in a newspaper plant overnight, like stacking the bundles of papers onto a skid, taking out the conveyor, and then loading the truck and putting them to a hopper, into a feeder, or what else did I use? I used to drive a limousine. I used to stay up all night driving a taxi cab and go into my real job. And there's probably other gigs, valet parker. I had so many hustles. So when I discovered DoorDash and Postmates and Uber Eats, I didn't want to go back to a regular job for a long time. Like I said, in addition to my real job, and eventually I retired from my regular job. But just because you retire doesn't mean that you can stop working. Sometimes your cost of living continues to go up. You still have expense, or you just need to keep busy. You need it mentally, whatever the reason is. For the longest time, after I had retired, all I did was these, and especially during the pandemic. Remember that in the pandemic, nobody was going to work. We're all working remotely. So, I work remotely for my regular job. And then when I wasn't working for my regular job, I'd be out there doing the app work. The point is that I did not start going back into regular work, where you actually show up and report for a job until probably around 2023. And but it was a long journey. It was a long journey. I remember during the pandemic, I was out there doing Uber Eats and DoorDash, and there was a lot of money to be made. There were a lot of orders. A lot of people were ordering takeout margaritas. I would drive around these neighborhoods, and you see families, they have chairs set up in the driveway, and they sitting there sipping a glass of wine, or they just all walk around the neighborhood. They look lost, like they didn't know what else to do. either, you know? So I was doing that, and I remember I was wearing a mask. I probably didn't start taking off the mask until around 2023. I was a diehard. I always wore a mask wherever I go. I didn't believe in the vaccine. I believed in wearing a mask and just staying the hell away from people, which I'm pretty good. But you know what I learned, from doing Lyft and, both driving people, you have a little more interaction than you would if you were delivering food. By the way, don't allow me to forget that I also did Uber Eats and DoorDash on scooter, bicycle, and foot. I was living outside of DC in Northern Virginia for a while, and I lived in a little city there called Arlington, and I figured out how to make a few bucks, just delivering on my scooter, which is kind of a funny story too, because a scooter only had like a 3 or 4 mile range. So every time I did a few orders, I had to come back and charge a scooter, or I'd have to walk the scooter half the way so I wouldn't use up all the juice in the scooter. Sometimes I just used a bicycle. But anyway, what I learned from all these experiences, all these years, doing the food delivery, driving people Lyft, driving people Uber. I mean, it was great. It was fun, but you had to kick yourself in the ass to work. That's one thing, because no one's going to tell you to get up and go. And I would do this thing called monitoring. Monitoring is when I would, you know what it is, cherry picking. You've seen them do. They sit at the airport. They have the app on and they just cherry pick. And I would just monitor. Or I wasn't even intending to work sometimes. I would just go on the app. Let me see what's going on. Let me see his money to be paid. But I wouldn't take it. You see, there's no one to kick you in the ass to do that. So you could say, yeah, I'll work. Or you do 1 or 2 orders. And you say, I don't feel like doing anymore. I just want to go home and get wasted. So that's one bad thing about doing the app work, is because there's no one to motivate you to tell you to be there. But the other thing that I learned from doing the app work is that it isolates you. There's no socialization. And look, think about it. When you put down Uber or Lyft, who are you supposed to put as a reference? Name a super. I don't know what the hell. I just write 1-800-Uber. What the hell am I supposed to write? There's no person in Uber. You're talking to somebody in another country. You're not a human being. You're part of an algorithm. The only real contact you have is minimal conversation with the people in the food place, but they're not too much of a friend. They're just going to say hello or goodbye, but they're not going to give you much conversation. Yeah, the drivers, you drive, the passengers when you drive, you have lengthy conversation, but you're never going to see them again. Maybe you give them your Instagram channel or your card, so nothing's really going to occur. So it's not really healthy after a while. It's isolative. Second of all, it's a pain in the ass for the taxes. You do it in a 1099. Okay, yeah, they don't take any taxes out, but if you don't want to get raped in taxes, you have to go all these itemizations and count all your receipts and how much you spent in gas, and then you got to add these worksheets to tabulate and all this shit. It just complicates things. I mean, it was fun while it was, but I avoid any kind of job that I try to do now is a W-2 job, even if it means working from home on a computer, and I consider that sometimes too. But for the last couple of years, I have not done any Uber or Grubhub or DoorDash. And I must say, Grubhub was a good app to work for. They paid a little more. They gave you a little more time. If you work for DoorDash, they kind of push you along a little. They rush you, and they got you on a timer, and they have very little tolerance for any screw-ups. They're very, very quick to warn you and suspend you and all that crap. Uber's a little more better. Uber's a more laid back, but Uber, you don't make too much per order. The most money that to be made is driving Uber X or Lyft. Lyft pays a little less. Lyft has like a little bit of a trashier type of clientele than Uber. Uber is a little more upscale. A lot of people on Lyft will curse you out and be rude or not tip or just blow you off. That's my experience. Or report you, not say anything in the back seat and be quiet, and then go ahead and complain about your car. I've had my car taken off the app. I wouldn't be able to I wasn't allowed to drive my car because a customer would complain about something in the back seat and they wouldn't tell me about it, and they would report it, and then Lyft would not let me return until I showed a picture or receipt that the work was done. So, and these are all I'm glad to have those experiences. I'm glad, but if I ever had to go back to driving, honestly, I'd probably go back to driving a taxi cab. I mean, yes, Problem with taxi cab, you got to take every ride that the dispatcher gives you. With Uber, you can cherry pick, and Uber, you can quit when you want to. With taxi cabs, you can't. But then again, it's not your car, the taxi cab. You're getting cash. You know, people are less likely to mess with you in a cab than they are in Uber because they're carjacking Ubers left and right, and they're stealing your phone, blah, blah. I don't know. I try to avoid all that stuff, really. I really try to avoid driving. And hey, I'm just talking about work. You know, I don't make any money doing any podcasting. I don't make any money doing comedy. I don't make any money doing music, so I got to make money somehow. So let me talk about the things that gives me a few dollars in my pocket, right? Hey, thank you very much. Happy Wednesday to everybody. And I might have a couple other episodes. I have to go through my notes and see if I can construct something constructive to talk about. Have a good night.